If you're traveling between eastern and western Japan, more than likely you're going to pass through the small town of Sekigahara. Only 7,000 people live in the town, but it's crossed by local roads, an expressway, the Japan Rail Line, and the Shinkansen. This is because Sekigahara lies in a valley between two long mountain ranges. Traveling via Sekigahara is far, far faster than any alternative routes, especially back when you had to walk the whole way. So maybe it's inevitable that a battle would take place here. The Battle of Sekigahara is sometimes called Japan's Gettysburg, because much like Gettysburg, it's a battle that people have heard of. Sekigahara is in fact sister cities with Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, as well as Waterloo in Belgium. The more astute among you may have detected a pattern. The famous battle is really the only thing that separates Sekigahara from 100 other small rice farming towns across Japan, so you can understand why they lean into it. The Battle of Sekigahara was the climax of Japan's Warring States period, which left the islands a single unified country under warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi. But though he had won Japan, his health was failing him. Shortly before his death in 1598, Hideyoshi gathered his closest advisors and had them swear allegiance to his 5-year-old son, Hideyori. They were to ensure that Hideyori succeeded his father. After the warlord's death, it took only a year for infighting to start among Hideyoshi's consuls. The Loyalists, those who still supported Hideyoshi's son, were led by Ishida Mitsunari and the so-called Western Army. They were opposed by Tokugawa Ieyasu, formerly Hideyoshi's most senior advisor, and head of what was helpfully called the Eastern Army. The actual fighting between the Eastern and Western armies pales in comparison to the battle of alliances and personalities that took place over several months leading up to the battle. Ieyasu had been accused, accurately, by the other council members of marrying off his children to several prominent families, providing him with allies all over the country. Ieyasu also brokered secret deals with Mitsunari's retainers, promising them prominent positions if they switched sides. Some of Hideyoshi's most loyal retainers, like Fukushima Masanori, took the offer. Ieyasu was the richest daimyo in Japan, and Mitsunari was an abrasive bureaucrat, so you can imagine how well this went for the loyalists. The battle kicked off around 8 a.m., but neither army finished setting up camp for the night until around 3 in the morning. Some latecomers were still straggling in after sunrise. And even if you were lucky enough to take a nap, it would have been difficult with the rain coming down in sheets. Now, since I'm a stickler for realism, I endeavored to recreate these conditions as closely as I could, by getting only a single hour of sleep in a tent that was supposedly waterproof, but was in fact not. Sekigahara is a very pleasant place for a long walk, but not when you're in a half-awake stupor and have a splitting headache. My knowledge of tactics is generally limited to XCOM, so I'm not going to dwell too deeply on the order of battle. Put simply, both sides walked onto the field that day with roughly 80,000 soldiers. Mitsunari had a slight numerical advantage, and his troops were also deployed on high ground to the west. Mitsunari's trump card was an 18-year-old commander named Kobayakawa Hideaki. Hideaki's forces were deployed on a hill south of the valley. After Mitsunari's forces engaged Ieyasu's, Kobayakawa's men would sweep down the hill and flank the Eastern Army, running them through with their spears. For the first few hours, Mitsunari and Ieyasu were evenly matched. the young bureaucrat was doing well enough that it made the battle-hardened Ieyasu nervous. But Ieyasu commanded absolute loyalty in his army, and Mitsunari did not. Shimazu Yoshihiro was an ally of Mitsunari's, and he showed up to the battle that day. But he felt snubbed by the younger man and ignored his orders. Shimazu's men did not move. They only defended against attackers that came their way. And Shimazu was not the only vassal who had been rubbed the wrong way by Mitsunari. His secret weapon, Kobayakawa, held a grudge against him. Conversely, Ieyasu had promised the young general territories of his own in exchange for turning on the loyalists. Kobayakawa remained perilously indecisive, but eventually the young general commanded his troops to attack the loyalists. He charged into the Western Army's flank, devastating the troops of generals like Konishi Yukinaga. Kobayakawa probably did not change the course of history, but he turned what would have been a brutal, drawn-out struggle for Ieyasu into a victory lap. The battle was over in less than 6 hours. In the end, almost a third of Mitsunari's men ignored his orders or actively fought against him. Given these circumstances, perhaps it's understandable that Mitsunari fled the battlefield. This was not the end of the road for Ieyasu. He would eventually go on to defeat Hideyoshi's then teenage son at Osaka. But Sekigahara was the last obstacle of any real size standing in the way of total conquest. Alright, let's do the Gettysburg thing. After the battle was lost, Shimazu Yoshihiro escaped by charging straight through the enemy army's lines and returned to Kyushu. When Ieyasu learned of Shimazu's refusal to fight for Mitsunari, he was allowed to hold on to his territory. Fukushima Masanori served Ieyasu until the shogun's death. He was later demoted for renovating Hiroshima Castle without permission by Ieyasu's son, who had not showed up at Sekigahara until after the battle was over. Hosokawa Tadaoki engaged in fierce combat during the battle. One of the warriors who fought with him was his 54-year-old mother. Konishi Yukinaga was executed. As one of Japan's first Christians, he was beheaded beneath a cross, and his death was lamented by Pope Clement VIII. Ishida Mitsunari was soon captured and executed alongside Konishi Yukinaga about a month after the battle. His head was placed on a pike alongside a road in Kyoto. Kobayakawa Hideaki died, possibly of alcohol abuse, 2 years after the battle. He was 21. Tokugawa Ieyasu's victory left his hold over Japan unquestioned, and his family would rule the country for the next 250 years. Today, the family controls 2 museums and a brand of coffee. Sekigahara today probably looks rather similar to how it did 400 years ago. Buildings have slowly creeped onto rice fields, which were once battlefields. But much of the town is still dominated by wide open plains with a few mountains with commanding views of the town below. Even if you only have passing knowledge of the battle, I recommend a visit. Make sure to get a good night's sleep, though.